Okay, welcome back to Cinematic Syndrome. I am your host, Codie Ririe. Again, we are joined by Mac. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
And we are on an alien kick this time of year, which is appropriate because all these movies came out in June and July. So, and we're having anniversaries of the first one and not the second one. I'm sure some kind of anniversary, just not an even numbered one.
Yeah, like something with a 9 in it, probably.
That's right. Anyway, we've been going back over these, and we've of course done Alien, and now we're going to dive into the sequel, ingeniously titled Aliens.
Yeah.
Plural.
Aliens. I like an S is like a backwards too, you know?
I actually do think it's ingenious. Like, Alien 2 is one thing,
yeah,
but Aliens perfectly tells you what the movie's about.
Yeah, it's like we realized how bad one alien was in the first movie. Now, aliens, there are more of them? Oh.
Yeah, and it's an immediate, like, oh, good crap. There's a ton of them. And also the tagline's very good. The "This time it's war."
Yeah.
It's a really good tagline. I mean, second only to "In space, no one can hear you scream," which is the first one.
And it's very different from the first one because now you have people who are actually trained to fight the aliens.
Well, they actually have weapons.
Yeah.
That the mining ship, the Nostromo, had a flamethrower and a cattle prod.
Yeah, that's what I was going to call it. Yeah, it's basically a cattle prod. Yeah, she had like a harpoon gun later, like near the end of the movie. True. But honestly, it was just a means to push it out of the ship. It wasn't really good at killing it.
And now we've got, machine guns out the wazoo.
Yeah. Explosives. And
jets.
As what was his name? Hudson would say, "We got nukes." Like, game over, man, game over. He's like, yeah.
We'll get to Hudson, who might be my favorite character, by the way.
I know.
He should be annoying. Like, on paper, he should be annoying, but in practice, he's amazing.
I know, he is. He really is.
Anyway, so this came out in 1986, directed by James Cameron. The first one's Ridley Scott. Like I said, very different movies. Mac, your thoughts, general thoughts on Aliens. This is the first time you've watched it, correct?
Yes.
And then compared to Alien, which one's your favorite? What were your initial reactions?
It's a bit of a hard question to answer because it's like asking somebody, do you like a burrito or a hamburger more? It really just depends on the movie.
Very different things.
Yeah, they're different things. So personally, I'm more partial to action movies than I am to like slower movies. Like, and I'm not saying Alien's bad. It's just not really my cup of tea or my hamburger. Aliens is my hamburger.
Okay, so what was it about this one that struck you as more your type of movie than the first one?
I feel like there were a lot of just kind of. I don't want to say there's more characters. They're just different characters. Ones I get attached to more like those gung ho military guys. I really like Bishop, the loyal android. Yeah. And then of course just the action set pieces like them going into the hive being one of my favorite parts. And just it was a lot faster paced. It didn't take its time as much as the first one. It definitely does in the beginning, especially I feel like when the pods are opening up for the soldiers. It's kind of like an homage to the first movie when they open up in that movie. So it takes its time a little bit, but it ramps up the action, in the beginning of the first act. That's
true. It's a much faster paced movie, and depending on what version you're watching, it's a longer movie than Alien. Again, it's a matter of personal preference, but as far as the pacing goes, it's funny now that you watch it, and it does feel like it has kind of a slow setup beginning. Because movies now start off so fast and so whatever else. But at the time, this was a no-holds-barred thrill ride. This was crazy. This was no time to breathe. But it's so funny how pacing in movies has changed from 1986 until now. We'll get into all our favorite parts, which is one of my favorite things that we do when we discuss movies. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the people responsible for the movie. And the biggest person responsible for the change in tone, the change in genre, everything else, we're going to have to talk about James Cameron.
Of course.
He's, at this point, he had only done the first Terminator.
That's right, yeah.
And then he'd also directed some kind of Piranha something or other. Very low-budget horror movie.
Okay.
But Terminator was his big breakthrough, and then he got the keys to this. This actually, from what I understand, this was originally a different script called Mother that he had written that was not connected to Alien.
Okay.
And he had the idea of a woman who loses her daughter, who finds another little girl and raises her when they're faced with this sci-fi threat.
Okay.
And it was an original script. And when they asked him if he wanted to do Alien 2, which was called back then, then he thought that was a really good idea that he could retrofit into Aliens. I don't think he was wrong. I think that was a really good idea.
Yeah.
And also, he was the one that got... because I remember the studio originally were okay with Ripley not coming back.
Yeah.
And he was the one that was like, no, it's all about Ripley. It's all about her journey. What are your thoughts on Ripley in the second movie as compared to the first movie?
I think I like her a lot more in this movie than in the first one.
Okay.
Because in the first one, it didn't really focus on any particular character. I wouldn't even really call her the main character until she's she's the last one left. But I will say that she was the one person to kind of take charge, when things were getting pretty bad. Yeah. And, she, like I said in the last podcast, she was scared, but she was still, driven to, get the alien out of here and get herself out of there. So I feel like, there was already a setup for character development. They didn't have to make a sequel, but they did. And there was already something there before. I feel like if she wasn't that kind of person in the first film, it probably wouldn't work for her to all of a sudden be, taking charge and leading the Marines. It would have felt like it came out of nowhere. Yeah.
Well, it's true, because she has changed as a character in the second one. But it's not a radical change. Yeah. Or it is a fairly radical change, but it's not... I can see the character we saw in the first one, because when she's under stress in the first one, like you said, her reaction is not to shrink. Her reaction is to grab the reins. Yeah. Which is the exact same thing she does in this one. Now, in this one, of course, there's a... Depending on which version you watch, and we'll get to that too, there's a whole colony of people on the planet. LV... The
423, I don't know.
It's something with a 4. Anyway, and the Colonial Marines go down there, and she goes with the Colonial Marines, and they said that's the big difference. But when things go bad with the Colonial Marines, she's the one that takes charge. Yeah. And of course, she warns them the entire time that things are terrible and nobody listens. But I really liked her. What would you call it? Her change from the first movie to the second movie. It actually reminds me a lot of Linda Hamilton in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2.
Yeah, that's right. I know, they're very similar. Maybe they'll do like a movie in the future where both of them continue. I think that'd be kind of funny.
Well, they're making a new Terminator movie, and Linda Hamilton's back in it this next year.
Okay.
I don't have any faith in anything with Terminator anymore. But
yeah,
Terminator's off the subject.
Another time.
We can talk about Terminator on a different day. But okay, so we've got this new director. He's only done one other film. He changes the script for it to work. Let's talk about other people and their ideas they had for the movie.
Okay.
There's let's see. All right. Here's one that I did want to talk about. Stan Winston, big Hollywood pioneer in effects.
Oh yeah.
Now this is of course, before computer effects, but only a few years before. Mm-hmm. And all these aliens in the film. In the first film, you've got one alien. Yeah. In this film, you've got Mondo.
Yeah. and amount. A number of aliens.
And not to mention a giant alien queen.
Yeah.
Who is laying eggs. Yeah. Now, the giant alien queen was a practical creature, a giant puppet, I guess. What you'd say.
Yeah, and it took several guys to man that. We're not just talking, it's just one puppet. There's like two guys. No, it's like you got a couple guys for the arms, a couple guys for the legs, a couple people for the head. They even went back to the States, I think in California, to make like a prototype before they made the finished one. And they did a lot of rehearsing and stuff. So I think it's just baffling, especially in the the final scene where you see the queen moving and just thinking there's at least half a dozen guys moving that thing and we don't see any of them.
I know.
And it's not like they're blue screening them out. They're like just angling the camera correctly so that we don't see them.
Because when you used blue screen back then, it left these really big matte lines. It was very obvious effects. The thing that this movie, of course, it has lots of impact throughout time. But one of the funniest and most interesting thing is Steven Spielberg, when he saw Aliens, and then Jurassic Park came over his desk many years later. Well, just a few years later, actually. That's how he knew and gave him the confidence to say yes to Jurassic Park. It's because he'd seen the alien queen come to life. Yeah. And so he hired Stan Winston, who would make the T-Rex, the practical giant T-Rex, that was used in Jurassic Park later on. So without aliens, then we don't get Jurassic Park. At least Jurassic Park as we know it. So that's just one of the many things that we got from this movie. And the reason that Stan Winston even worked on the movie at all was because he'd worked on Terminator with James Cameron.
Yeah, he actually didn't like the idea of going into making a sequel. Sequels were kind of, I guess, taboo back then because, it's never going to be as good as the first one. But, I mean, since he's friends with James Cameron, and James Cameron, I believe, talked him into it, that's what brought him on board.
Well, and here's the thing, it's really interesting because Ridley Scott and James Cameron, they do this really weird mirror image of each other. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. These are the nerdy film thoughts that I have at night when I can't go to sleep. Is Ridley Scott's making the first Alien, right? Uh-huh. He makes that in England. He's a British guy himself. The crew and him get along great on Alien. Fantastic. They love him because they've worked on a million commercials with him. Fantastic. So Alien's successful enough, he wants to make another movie, which is Blade Runner. So he goes to Los Angeles to make Blade Runner with American crews. Mm-hmm. And they think he's in... They don't like him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the American cast members had a little bit of a hard time with Ridley. And it's not because he's a bad person. He just does things a certain way.
Well, he hadn't worked with a lot of actors up to that point either. And you see some of those other scenes where he's really slap them and stuff, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the cast, I will grant you, had a little bit of problem with Ridley, but the crew did not. Okay. So he goes to Los Angeles, and the crew and Ridley hate each other. There's a war where they make T-shirts to insult each other, and people quit by the hundreds, right? Okay. All right, James Cameron makes Terminator in America. He's Canadian, but that... For this purposes, that'll count for right now.
I always think Canada is America 2.0. No offense, Canadians. I'm just kidding.
How about 0.5? Anyway.
0.5. No, we love Canada.
Yeah, my wife's from Canada, so I can't. Anyway, so everything goes great. It's fine. It's a small budget movie, that he gets Aliens, which is made in England. Oh. He goes to England, and the crew and him hate each other. And they do not get along at all. They're taking tea breaks, and he doesn't understand what the crap is going on. And it's just funny to me that they both just switched, continents and switched movies and had the exact same experience. Mm-hmm. And they're both very, very strong-willed individuals. Yeah. They want it their way, and that's how it's going to be. And that makes for great movies sometimes, though. Yeah. That no, it's going to be my way. And I don't think Aliens would be as good if James Cameron had been okay, what would Ridley Scott do? He's no, it's his show. He's going to make it like he wants to make it.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I feel like the best movies are made by people who have any idea of what they want, and they don't let the studio interfere. They just say, this is the movie, this is what we're going to make. We're not just going to put it, put Venom in Spider-Man 3 just because Sony wants us to. No, you just...
As a hypothetical that never really would happen in real life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's something that would never happen. I mean, I'm so glad it hasn't happened. So glad.
Well, now the thing is trying to get him to put Venom in the MCU. And from what I understand, Kevin Feige's not... Anyway, I get distracted. Yeah. But
Spider-Man another time.
Yes. Let's talk about the actual making of the film in England. Mm-hmm. There were some things that you found in your research that I thought were really interesting that I didn't know about this. They were going to make a sequel right after the first film. Yeah, I had not heard that, and it says that they were going to do a male lead, and they weren't going to bring. I knew they weren't going to bring Sigourney Weaver back, but I had no idea that there was a sequel they were thinking about that was going to have a male lead right after. I thought that was really interesting because I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever wrote out a script for it. I don't know if I put that in the notes, but essentially what happened is Fox leadership changed a little bit, and so then they said, no, we don't want an Alien sequel right now. So I think, good heavens that they didn't approve it then, because we wouldn't have the awesomeness that is Aliens.
That's true. It probably would have been just like every other sequel, minus Empire Strikes Back. Mm-hmm. Back then, it was just a pale imitation of the original. And sometimes you need some time. I did know that Ridley Scott was actually not happy because he really wanted them to come to him for the sequel. Yeah. And apparently they never approached him. That's his story, at least, is they never asked him if he would do a sequel. And so he's not too happy with the sequels that came after. Even Aliens, which he admits is a pretty good movie,
Yeah.
It's not what he would have done, so he's not happy with it.
Yeah, well, it's too bad. You know what they should have done? They should have brought him on for Alien 3.
That's true. I mean, who knows what would have happened there? And we can talk in the future about 3 and 4 because they're their own thing. But
yeah, they're quite a thing.
They are. They're very interesting to talk about, though. Let's see. What else? There's fascinating things that you found.
One thing that I thought was interesting is that they were trying to get British actors for Aliens, but it seems like they didn't really get any.
Well, it was something to do with tax, or it was like a law. Like if you made a movie in England, you had to have a certain percentage that were British actors.
Okay.
I remember reading about that. And that was one of the things that I think they got around it by having a lot of the background characters be British. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. I think almost all of the main characters are not British. They're all American.
Yeah, and even if they were technically British citizens, I think they were just living there in Britain temporarily. They were actually American. For like, what's her name? The actress that played Vasquez. What's her face? Jeanette Goldstein. Yeah,
yes,
she was actually. I think she was a British citizen. She was doing some acting in Britain, but Aliens gave her the money and the confidence to go back to the States and do some more show business over there.
Well, something else that you put on here that was really interesting. I had no idea that Vasquez was going to be a man originally, and I don't know how much they changed.
Maybe a lot of things. I don't know.
But that's the same thing with the first movie, right? Is all the characters were written where they could have been a man or a woman.
Yeah.
It wouldn't really matter gender-wise, and that's interesting that this happened a little bit on this one, too. I did want to mention, when you're coming to cast, my favorite character, I have two. I have a tie. I'm going to cheat. For my favorite character and then my least favorite character. But he's supposed to be my least favorite character, so it's not a problem with the movie.
Okay.
But I really like, we were talking about Bill Paxton playing Hudson.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I ever saw Bill Paxton was in Terminator. He's in it for like 30 seconds.
Really?
Yeah.
Does he get axed off or something?
I can't remember if he kills him or I know he beats him up. He's like a punk and he takes his clothes to the Terminator. Arnold does.
Okay.
In the first one.
Well, I think if it's the first one, Arnold kills like everybody. And the second one, he doesn't. I don't think he kills anybody in the second one.
Right, because it's against the rules in the second one.
Yeah.
He's the good guy. But I really like Bill Paxton because he is me in the movie. Not at the beginning so much, because I've never been a cocky, whatever. Yeah. But that we're all going to die, that's how I would be.
Yeah, I think I could understand him. And it's the thing is, like, he's a little bit eccentric about that, how they're all going to die. But when, the aliens do show up, he pulls his weight around. He doesn't do, like, cower in the corner or anything.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your least favorite character.
Yes. My least favorite character is, hang on, Paul Reiser, Burke.
Yeah.
Talk about a slimy villain.
Yeah. I mean, I was totally on board with Ripley when she's, like, slamming him against the wall. Like, these people are all
do worse.
I know. It's just like, you wanted to get rich and you ended up killing an entire colony.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I ever saw this, I was in high school. We rented it on VHS. Again, old. And I got a stomach ache from it. Like, it was so tense for me. And the worst part for me was when Paul Reiser, Burke, locks the facehugger in the room with the little girl and with Sigourney Weaver.
Oh my
God. I've never hated a character more than that, and I've also never been more terrified by a scene. It's funny because I watch it now, and I don't think it's all that scary. But when I was in high school, that thing flying around, and she's got the tail around her neck and everything, man, that messed with me. That was...
I know, and it was a lot more mechanical than that little spider thing was a lot more mechanical than it was in the first one. Because in the first one, you just see it fall out of the ceiling. And,
yeah.
I mean, if you look closely, like, oh, it's kind of like it's like a rubber toy. It basically looks like that. But this one, they had like different motors in it, and the trick was trying to get the legs to move like actual legs rather than just spin around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was also what was the name of the guy who made the Queen?
Yeah. Sam Winston.
Yeah, Sam Winston. He was also in charge of doing that. And I just thought it was great because you see that and it's moving and it's like, oh, it looks like it's really alive and moving.
Well, and I thought, if we're going to be fair, and we've talked about this before we were recording, I'm a bigger fan of the first film than the second one. I love them both. But one of the things I think the first film does better, and this talks about the facehugger, You're right. In the one shot where it just falls, it kind of looks like a rubber toy. Yeah. Right? It's not articulating. It's not moving, And this is actually emblematic of all of the effects from the first movie to the second one. But it looks, especially when they're like dissecting it, it looks amazing.
Yeah, I would
like
agree.
It looks so real, even today. And apparently it was all sheep guts and stuff. But so motion wise, not that great. They couldn't do a lot with it. Same thing with the actual alien. It was the guy in the suit. It didn't look all that great, so they filmed it in a way that hid that.
Yeah.
In the second film, all of this, the special effects, the face hugger, the alien queen, the alien soldiers, or whatever. Yeah. They don't look as detailed. I don't think. Same thing even with the egg. Like the egg that opens up and the face hugger comes out. Mm-hmm. In the first film, it's got like motion inside of it.
Yeah, it's
and
like
there's drips going upside down.
Yeah, upside down. That was.
And it's like this really like organic looking thing. But again, there's only one that you see open up. And so in the second film, everything looks a little less detailed. Everything's not quite as organic, and yet it all moves in a much better fashion. The movement's much better in the second film. And that's what the focus was on, was, all right, well, we're not going to, not everything's going to be as lovingly painted and whatever else, but we're going to have 18 of them, and they're all going to move like crazy.
Right.
And so I think that's where the preference comes down, is do you really appreciate the details of this thing, or you like really love the fact that these things can move now, and they can move in a really convincing manner, Yeah,
because they hired several gymnasts and acrobatic people to
sure
to wear that's the terminology I just invented. So yeah, they hired them to dress up in the alien costumes, and so they feel more like oh, these guys can actually climb on walls and in the ceiling and come out of the walls and the floor.
That then one of the best shots in the movie is showing that motion when they look through the ceiling and there's a ton of them upside down crawling into the ceiling at them towards the end of the film. That's something that you would never see in the first film. Yeah. They just didn't have the capability of it. But by the time 86 rolled around, they'd figured it out. So, my tie for my second favorite character is Michael, I think it's Bean. I don't know how you pronounce that. Anyway, Hicks. I really like Hicks. He's kind of your square jaw hero, but I like the fact that he's not a big braggart.
Yeah.
He just kind of quietly does his job. I love that he sleeps through the horrible ship drop. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody else is terrified, and they're like, oh, somebody wake up Hicks. Like, I really like the character. I love the relationship he has with Sigourney Weaver, with Ripley. I love that he's kind of the dad, she's kind of the mom, and they have the kid. It's one of the great tragedies of Alien 3 is that all those characters that survive are killed off.
Yeah, and it really is too bad. Although, I will say, the one thing that this... you ever heard of the video game Aliens Colonial Marines?
I heard it was bad. That's all I heard.
Yeah, it is kind of bad. I haven't played it, but they retconned it so that apparently Hicks got out of the pod and swapped it with somebody else's body, and that's that's how he gets in the video game. It's like, okay, I guess, he's alive, so I guess I can't complain too much, but he shouldn't have died in the first place. But
well, they were the guy who made District 9 and he made
that's a good
Elysium. Was kind of a sci-fi guy. His pitch to the studio was he was going to forget about Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. He was going to make a movie that kept Hicks, that kept Newt, and had Sigourney Weaver going forward. And he has, if you look online, there's production drawings and stuff.
Okay.
But we have Ridley Scott to thank for that never happening, because he was like, no, we're doing Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and they kicked him to the curb.
Oh.
So who knows if it would have been good or not, but I like that angle, because I think Alien 3 is where it kind of went downhill. And the reason that I think people don't like Alien 3 is because I think they're really connected, like I was, to these characters.
Yeah. Because the way I saw Hicks, like you said, he was kind of like a father figure, and he had a relationship with Ellen Ripley. And also going back to the scene where he is asleep when they're dropping into the planet, I decided you kind of get a sense that he's probably the most seasoned out of the grunts, aside from Sarge.
Yeah.
Like Bill Paxton or Hudson, he pretends that he's been around, he's done it all, and he's like, I'm a bad A, and but no, Hicks is the real deal, and he doesn't have to say anything about it.
And that's, I think, really interesting shorthand about how you can tell who does have the experience. That's that way in real life too. The person who's confident, who knows what they're doing, doesn't have to broadcast it.
Yeah. And
I think that's a really interesting thing. But again, that should have made Bill Paxton's character really annoying. And I still don't find him annoying, though. Mm-hmm. I think that all comes down to the actor, too. He's such a likable actor that, at least for me, I think he's very funny.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of negates as annoying as he could be. Is there anything else character-wise or production-wise? Who are your favorite characters in the film?
I really like Vasquez.
Okay.
I think Ripley is definitely my favorite, but Vasquez, coming in at second with then Hickson. Bishop, I don't really know where to place him. I feel it's kind of interesting because when Lance Henriksen was talking about when he was doing Bishop, he said that his approach, because he had a rough childhood, was that he would just look at the people who were bothering him and he'd just say in his mind, I'm probably going to outlive you, so I can't be too judgmental of you. And if you really think about it, that's kind of true in this case with Bishop. He's going to outlive all these different humans because he's a robot.
Yeah.
And he even gets ripped in half, and he's still alive. All the other humans are dead, and he got ripped in half, and he's still alive. They got ripped in half, and they're dead.
Well, I love the scene where he does the knife trick, too. I'm much more well-versed in the first film. I'm not sure if they did that with a trick or if that was a real thing. Do you have any information on that?
As far as I know, I think he actually practiced for it. I didn't see anything.
It looks a little sped up to me.
Yeah, I think it definitely sped up. He actually practiced for it, too, though. He said he even split the top of his fingers a lot, and he practiced with several different knives. But, I mean, he was really committed, and
yeah.
And that's the thing is, he felt a lot of pressure because, it was kind of hard to follow up an act like, say, Ash from the first Alien, and you could argue that he's better. In fact, I'd probably say that he's better. But I do like Bishop because it's interesting because we're not because of Ash, you're left a little bit uncertain whether where does Bishop's loyalty lie.
Yeah.
Especially when he's looking at the alien spider facehugger, just like Ash was, and you're thinking
so fascinated. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm fascinated. Like, oh no, he's gonna betray us like Ash did. So it's left a little bit ambiguous because of the uncertainty of Ash.
Well, and they cast Lance Henriksen, and he was famous. I don't know I think it was Pumpkinhead. It was a series of scary movies where he was the scary monster. Mm-hmm. And also, I think he played a lot of villain roles in the past. So it was one of those, we're going to cast him, and you're going to know it's another android, and all of it's a ruse to make you as distrustful as Ripley is.
Yeah.
When she sees him. And then by the end, you're really rooting for him. At least I was.
Yeah.
He's such a likable character. And then, like I said, he gets ripped in half.
Yeah. I mean, at least in Alien 3, they didn't kill him off. I mean,
but he comes back in a really strange way.
Yeah. It didn't make a lot of sense. I don't know. Lance Henriksen, I thought he did such a good job with Bishop. I kind of wanted to know what other things he was. And I found out later he actually played Kerchak in Tarzan.
Really?
Yeah. He's a voice.
Oh.
And I thought, oh yeah, huh?
Well, I kept seeing him in small stuff. Like, he's in Close Encounters, but he's in a very small role. But he has such a distinctive look that he kind of sticks out.
Yeah.
But, I thought I'll have to say that Bishop's one of my favorite, too. I like Jeanette Goldstein because you see her play Vasquez, right?
Yeah.
She's super, one of the guys, macho, whatever. And then you see her in, Titanic, for example.
Wait, who is she in Titanic?
She plays an Irish mother.
Really?
Who is talking to her two children and singing, telling them a poem as they're drowning and stuff.
Oh.
And then she's also in Terminator 2.
Okay.
She's the foster mom in Terminator 2, who the T-1000 impersonates her and she stabs her husband through the milk carton.
Yeah, I remember that part.
So she's a really chameleon-like actress because she can go from super maternal and whatever to Vasquez, who is intimidating and
well, I mean, speaking of chameleon, she actually had a lot of makeup on for this. They put stuff on her to make her skin look darker. They made her wear eye contacts to make her eyes brown, because I don't think that she's Hispanic.
She's not Hispanic, no.
But I mean, we're made to think that she is. But yeah, I think she's a lot of fun. She really gives a lot of character to the Marines. I like her relationship with Drake. I mean,
they have a really cool back and forth. Yeah.
And he's like, hey, Vasquez, you ever get mistaken for a man? It's like, no. Do you? And then Drake's like, oh, you're just too bad.
Well, and I love the gun thing that she has, too. It's on a sling or whatever.
And what's cool about that is it's an actual gun. It was...
oh, really? I didn't know that.
It's a MG-42. It was the Germans' main heavy machine gun in World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, it shoots 8mm bullets. It's like... It's the same size like a 30-06. It's a big bullet.
It's a big gun, yeah.
And I've actually seen it in action, and I'm like, man, it destroys whatever it hits. It's it was nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw.
Oh.
So, but I thought that was cool. They used actual guns to make into the guns.
Well, you're gonna have to forgive me because I'm not, like I said, as well versed in this one. But the guy who plays the lieutenant, who I don't know if he's on our notes, but he's the one who has never really had any combat experience. And
Gorman, yeah,
Gorman.
William Hope.
Can I say I love his arc too?
Yeah,
because he's exactly what you think he would be. He's this unexperienced, makes bad calls. You're just irritated with him, and then he gets knocked out.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, he becomes, like, he steps up.
Yeah. When
it's time to step up. And I love that him and Vasquez go out holding the grenade together. Yeah. I don't know, I really like that, because you don't expect him to... Because James Cameron, heaven love him, is not a subtle guy when it comes to his screenplays. And they're all very, this is the wimpy commander. This is the whatever else. But his movies work because he's very good at that. But I thought that... This is my favorite James Cameron movie, by the way. Mm-hmm. Of all of his movies, I think Aliens is the best one he's ever done. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of things like that. By having unexpected turns in the characters. But they don't feel like it's untrue to the character. But so I love Bishop coming out and being the hero. And I also really like when Gorman decides to step up and do what's required. Because I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought we were going to keep that same character. But if you watch the movie, everybody kind of has subtle arcs.
Yeah,
it's very well written that way.
Yeah, I feel like with Vasquez, like her main arc is like dealing with loss. She lost a like a good friend and possible even maybe lover. I don't know.
Yeah, I've struggled with that because I don't know. They don't really play up the romantic angle at all.
Yeah,
it's almost like she's a really close like brother in the trenches.
Yeah,
kind of a thing. But it's not out of the question either. But they have very little screen time because it's Drake, right? That's her buddy.
Yeah.
They have very little screen time, but man, do they sell that?
Yeah.
That bond, and so it is really sad when he dies, and she has to deal with that.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like with the other Marines, like the ones that they die like in the first attack. Sarge was a lot of fun, and he actually had some experience in the Army too, I believe.
Well, I heard that, and that's why the language comes very easy to him. You can tell.
And I think you ever play the Halo games?
No.
Okay. Well, there's a character named Sergeant Johnson. I just think I had to wonder, like, did they get inspiration off him? Because like they look exactly the same. African American, black mustache, cigar. Always barking orders, except he's in the future Marine Corps. Well, actually, it's both Marine Corps, just a different universe.
I would think it's a safe bet because this movie's so beloved, especially by, I'm sure, video game maker nerd people, that they would definitely go in for that. Let's see. I wanted to talk about how the film was received when it came out. Mm-hmm. Then we'll get into our favorite parts. I thought this was really interesting because this is a movie that Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Best Actress for. And I was trying to think of or look up a precedent, and I don't think there is one. Mm-hmm. Like, people get nominated for roles in movies about cancer and about, like serious dramas that are happening right now. They don't get nominated for Aliens.
Yeah, which was essentially a blockbuster action movie, right?
Especially science fiction.
Yeah.
Back then, of course, science fiction was making inroads, but not as an Oscar thing. It was becoming more popular. So I think it's really interesting that she got nominated. The movie got nominated for a bunch of Oscars. And I get the technical stuff because it was so good you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
But I was really happy to see that. And that wasn't the last time she was nominated. She was nominated several other times. But so the movie, and I think it made an incredible amount of money. It's still, like you've written here, I think it's safe to say that it's the most popular movie of all the franchise.
Oh, yeah, I would agree.
And I even though it's not my favorite, I can definitely see why. And I agree. Is it your favorite? You've seen all of them, right?
Yeah, I think it's my favorite. I think the first one's growing on me, but I think it'll probably be a while before I think it's better than that. Before I think the first one's better than the second one. It's just because, like I said, do you feel like having a hamburger or a burrito? Right now, I feel like having hamburgers.
Okay, well, let's talk about the theatrical cut versus the extended cut.
Okay, it's not too different, but I feel like in terms of the extended cut, you have more stuff like them setting up the turrets, or the really good part where Burke explains to Ripley that your daughter passed away while you were in cryo freeze, and that's just like that's just heartbreaking,
Well, do you know that picture they show her of her daughter Did you hear the story behind that picture?
I didn't know.
Okay, well, the picture, we were discussing, actually in the car on the way here, about how we don't like it when an ancestor to a character is played by that same actor.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, they feel the same way in this movie because the daughter, the picture of the daughter, is actually Sigourney Weaver's mother.
Okay.
And so there's a picture, so she looks a lot like her, but she's older, which she would have been in this story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the best, best ways that can be done.
Yeah.
Because you actually have an actual resemblance, but it's not the same person. And so I really like that. That's one of my favorite scenes, too. I have watched both movies now, both the extended cut and the theatrical cut. And I'm a fan of the extended cut, I think.
Yeah.
I could do away with some of the stuff with the colonial people at the beginning. Mm-hmm. That can maybe move a little bit faster, but that's a small complaint compared to what you get on this stuff. I love the turret guns. I think that's, for some reason, really cool.
Yeah.
I also really like the scene we were discussing where Ripley discovers, that her child has passed away, because that leaves a void that gets filled by the Newt.
Yeah.
Later on. What about your thoughts? Extended cut, theatrical cut?
I'm probably going to stand with the extended cut, because I feel like like what you just mentioned, where she finds out that her daughter passed away. It sets up stuff for like when she bonds with Newt. It's filling the void, so to speak. I also, although one thing, it's like I have a little bit mixed feelings when they show us the colony before. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish they would have left that out, and even the part where like Newt's parents find it, because honestly, I hate to say this, but Newt's parents are basically, they're by the number of horror actors.
Yeah, they're not great.
Yeah, it's like if they were in another horror movie, you would always think these people are going to die first, and they do. But I think it would have been cool if we left out the colony stuff. So that way it was a little more ominous, and you could just imagine what the place used to be like when you're going through the wreckage.
I totally get what you're saying. At the same time, I love the comparison between the building being in great shape with the little kid on the big wheel riding through it, and then you see it all destroyed. I can see it coming either way, but I'm still going to have to go with the extended cut.
Yeah.
Because the extended cut feels like, and if you watch the special features, James Cameron talks about that's the movie that he made. Mm-hmm. And then he had to cut it down for runtime stuff.
Yeah.
And now when it comes to Alien, the reason I like the theatrical cut better, I think, is because that's, again, the movie Ridley Scott wanted to make. Mm-hmm. That I think that it feels like their vision, their story, and then when you get interference, that's when I lose them a little bit. So we both kind of agree on that. Favorite, what was the stuff, your favorite scenes, things that stuck out when you watched it?
Okay. Well, let me just, because there's a lot of parts. I guess I'll just start from the beginning. When Ripley has a nightmare of the alien coming out of her. And the thing is, like, I had a feeling it was like a dream sequence, because like they're not going to kill her off at the beginning of the movie. You just don't do that. And then Alien 3 happened. I'm like, oh. So yeah, that happens, and she wakes up, and just going through that, and you seeing her wake up, different times, and how she's just so stressed about that. It was really traumatizing. Just to establish that, like, she really doesn't want to go to. I think it was LV-426.
Yes, I saw
LV-426. Yeah. Okay, we got it. I was 3 digits off earlier. Yeah, so just establishing that she has PTSD from that, and like, who wouldn't? You just saw your friends get ripped apart by this alien.
Well, and for her, if you think about it continuity-wise, the events of the first film happen, right before this film.
Yeah.
In the hypersleep or whatever, it's been like 50 years, but for her it's been... So all that trauma's fresh.
Yeah, it was like, a week ago or a couple days ago.
Yeah. Cool. So what else sticks out to you? What are your favorite moments?
When they first arrive in the colony and you just see the wreckage and stuff. And like I said before, I'm sometimes I like the fact that, they didn't show it, and sometimes I do like the fact that they showed, what it looked like before. It just depends on my mood. But yeah, they go in there and they see everything's all ripped apart, and she points out, like, hey, look at the floor, and you see the floor, and it looks like it was burned away by acid.
Yeah.
So she knows.
Very cool, huh?
Yeah, she knows that the aliens are there. So, and just when they're going in there and they're like, being all tactical about it, they're prepared, but the aliens are nowhere to be seen.
I like that because it's really using the audience's knowledge of the first film. Because when you see acid burns, then you know what's going on.
Yeah. And
then when you see, that's another argument for, I guess, removing the Newt's parents getting attacked, because then you see the face hugger on the dad, But then they go in and you see all the dead face huggers. Actually, there's one that's alive because it goes after Burke.
It goes after Burke. It's like, if only the glass was a little bit weaker, we got him.
And so all of that is marvelous build-up. And I think people talk about the first film as the scary one and the second film as the action one. Here's the thing. Second movie's scary.
Yeah.
I think Aliens has a lot of like really scary stuff in it. And it shows that everybody remembers the action stuff, but that stuff only works because there's this long, slow build-up to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about when they go to the colony, the first part of it, they go through that whole first building, they find Newt, they don't find any aliens.
Yeah.
There's no fighting in that first building. They have to go to a second scene where they go and they find all the heat signatures or whatever, and that's when all hell breaks loose, which that's an amazing scene too, by the way.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like, because like like you said, that entire scene where they go in there and they don't find anything, it's just all build. Plus they have this, I don't know if it was in the music or was just some sort of sound effect, but they do this thing, it's like a ticking, it's like...
Yes.
Like, in that part, it's almost like it's like ticking to a time bomb. I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who said that, you know, a bomb exploding doesn't create tension, but knowing that there's a bomb in the room that's ticking down and you don't know where it is, that creates tension. And,
right.
And that's what that whole scene is for, building up to the part where they do go to the hive and they go to try to rescue any of the remaining colonists. That scene too alone was like breathtaking.
Well, can I say the thing I love about the scene where they go into and they first get attacked is a lot of that is done with like video cameras on their helmets and on their shoulders or whatever too. It makes for a really like you're stuck there with them, like a very first person almost like a first person video game kind of a experience, and I really like that. And I also love the the whole, again, it's really good building up. You can't use your guns. You can't, you know, we've introduced guns to the movie, and now we're going to take them away because you might blow the whole place up. You know, I like that a lot. I think that also by putting Ripley in a place where she can't help, it makes her into kind of us. She's watching it on screen. She knows what's going to happen. Can't do anything about it. Yeah, and that's another big Hitchcock thing. Is, you know, like Rear Window. He'd always put the main character in a place where he can see the horrible thing happening and he can't do anything about it. Yeah,
it's like a feeling of helplessness.
Yes, and it really helps with suspense. I will say that, and if you have some more favorite scenes, we'll definitely get to them. But my favorite scene, and I only have the one I want to talk about, is towards the end of the film. They know the aliens are going to attack. All of the turret guns are going off. I love that too. That's a great. You see the numbers coming down or whatever. You know, good golly, there's so many of them. And when they have the motion detector, and I think Hudson's the one that has the motion detector.
Yeah.
And you see there's, you know, dozens of them coming, but they're not there. They're not there. They're not there. They're right there on top of them, but they're not there. And then when I think it's Hicks. Is it Hicks that looks to the ceiling?
Yeah, he opens up the ceiling.
And that's that wonderful shot of all of them upside down crawling in. That's just amazing filmmaking. I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the music's a little bit toned down at the part, or is it? I can't remember. When you look for the ceiling, I just can't remember.
There's a big sting there.
Yeah.
There's like a violin shriek or whatever when you see them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's also a big sting when they first go into the reactor room and they find the lady all cocooned up and they push her head back and her eyes open.
Yeah, she's still alive, and then the chest burster comes out, and then like Ripley, she turns away because like she remembers that happening to what was his name? Kane? Was it Kane?
Yeah, poor Kane.
May he rest in peace. He went off to heaven to sell wands.
That's right. Any other last favorite parts you want to talk about?
Okay, I think my favorite part has to be where like Ripley just, you know, like loses it with Gorman, just tells her and like do something. she like, you know, throws him aside, decides to drive the vehicle to smash into the hive. Like, and I just think for me that kind of just like it was really good character moment for Ripley because it establishes that like she's seen this happen before and she's terrified to go in there. Yeah. She doesn't want to see all these people get killed killed again like she witnessed before. Also the music. I believe it was James Horner.
James Horner, yeah. Yeah,
just the music during that whole scene. It's just like so. It just really builds, you know, the action and like, you know, she goes in there, she crashes in there. I think that would have to be my favorite scene because it's really good. It's a really good character moment for Ripley and really just establishes the atmosphere, the urgency of the event.
Well, and I loved the in that scene. Excuse me, when they one of the aliens, I can't remember, or one of the Marines gets the blood on him.
Oh yeah,
and it's like eating through his armor. I think it might be Bill Paxton. And he takes it off. Apparently, the stuff they were using to make that smoke was highly toxic.
Oh.
And all of them breathed it, and all of them got horribly sick.
Ew.
And James Cameron didn't care, and they kept going.
Oh my god.
So that tells you something about that. Anyway,
Okay.
Also speaking of the score, which I think is a wonderful score, if I remember correctly, James Horner was not happy with it, and he didn't have very much time to write it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he didn't. I think like Cameron kept changing it, and he actually ultimately said that he was unsatisfied with that. Do I have anything about that? I'm just trying to see if I...
Oh, yeah, it says here the score for the Ripley fighting the Queen was written the night before.
That's right, yeah.
I had to record it.
And actually, who did the score for the first movie?
Jerry Goldsmith, the score for the first film.
Yeah, actually, some of his score actually shows through. It's like, it's in the part where like Ripley is like running from the Queen and gets into the elevator. Some of his score is like in that scene.
Oh, nice.
Because like they ran out of James Horner, and it's like,
well, it's funny because after all that, he wasn't happy. Then he won an Oscar for it.
Yeah. So like he did a good job. I mean, imagine what he would do if the director actually gave him enough time. You know.
Well, and it's funny because when James Cameron went out to make Terminator 2, I remember they asked James Horner to do the soundtrack, and he was like, "No, screw you guys, I hate you." Like we had a horrible experience on this. And James Cameron, he didn't do Terminator, but he eventually apologized. They worked out their differences, and James Horner did the soundtrack for Titanic, and for Avatar. Okay. So he's done all of James Cameron's movies. He died in a plane crash actually a couple of years ago.
Oh.
James Horner did. But they worked out their differences. And some of the best scores, like, no matter what you think about Titanic or Avatar, and we can have a discussion about their strengths and weaknesses, I think they both have really good scores. I think was a very talented guy.
Okay.
And so I just think it's so funny also that with the first film, Jerry Goldsmith wrote this big elaborate score, and they were like, no, and they threw it all out, had him rewrite it, and he almost as a joke did all this like really minimal, like, you know, metal clanking, whatever else. And he's like, this will show them, they'll want to put my score back. And he plays on the second one, and they're like, perfect, and it's in the movie. So I think it's funny that he was, you know, kind of writing as a joke, and they loved it. And in this one, he's not happy at all, and he wins an Oscar. So sometimes maybe composers aren't the best judge of how well they've done with something, because the score for this one too is talk about, especially at the end when she's fighting the Queen and she's in the elevator and all that stuff. That stuff works, I think, in large part because the music's so good.
Yeah, and that's the difference between like James Horner and Jerry Goldstein. Like Jerry Goldstein's music was meant to be more romantic. James Horner was made to make you jump more.
Yes, and also drive that tempo.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised, and also not surprised, that I found out he composed for Star Trek 2. You've seen Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan.
Oh, I'm a giant Star Trek
guy. I think Wrath of Khan's probably the best Star Trek movie. But I remember the theme that they would play in Star Trek 2, and I'm just like, oh yeah, it sounds kind of similar. I mean, it's not that they're copying, but you can kind of hear the same kind of beats, you know? Well,
if you want the best James Horner scores are probably Braveheart. He did a fantastic job on Braveheart. Titanic's a great score. He loves to do, it's like a big timpani hit, but also with metal behind it. Mm-hmm. So it's this real like ting, ting, ting thing that he does. And also, he loves to do, this is in The Perfect Storm too, his score for that, to do piano and you just mash the keys and it goes down. And for some reason, it sounds really good.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like he would have been good for like Terminator. Did he do Terminator?
He would have. No. Brad Fidel, I think was his name, did Terminator, which is a shame. Even though that's a pretty good score, I think James Horner is one of our best, film scores we ever had. So him and Jerry Goldsmith. Interestingly enough, Jerry Goldsmith wrote the score for Star Trek 1.
Okay.
James Horner wrote the score for Star Trek 2. And they did the same thing for Alien and Aliens.
Oh, so it's kind of like just the parallels.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of fun. And they came out, the Star Trek 1 and Alien came out in the same year. Mm-hmm. So Star Trek 2 came a lot faster than Aliens did. But let's see. Oh, I liked this, that you went over this, and I remember reading this review too. But let's talk a little about how Roger Ebert felt about the movie. I really felt a kinship to his reaction to it when I saw it in high school. It did. I watched the whole thing through my fingers. Like,
Yeah.
it scared me so bad that I felt tense and awful at the end of it. And he talks about the exact same thing happening to him. He's like, it's a fantastic movie. It's really well made, and I didn't like watching it.
Oh, okay.
And I felt the same way. I've revisited it a lot and, kind of felt better about it. But when you're reading about Ebert's thoughts on the movie, what stuck out to you?
I think he felt the intensity of the fighting went on for too long. I just thought no, but the thing is, there's like so much build to it, and they have a couple pauses in when they're trying to figure out how to get the heck out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably disagree on that front. Feeling drained, I guess I kind of understand that because like near the finale, it's just you go from action to action to action. You go to one they're running from the aliens and like it's Ripley, Hicks, and Bishop, and Newt are the last ones left, and they're trying to find Newt. Newt gets captured by the aliens. Then Ripley has to go down into the to the hive again, to where the alien queen is to get her, and then they escape. They just barely make it out of the place before it blows up, and then Ripley has to fight the queen. So I could understand feeling a little bit drained, but I loved every minute of it.
Well, and take this for what it's worth. Ebert was always a huge fan of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
He included it in his great movies, essays, and whatever else. So you're looking at a guy who much prefers the tone of slow build, whatever else. So again, I think he's like me in that way, that it's just more his cup of tea, that first film. But also, like him, I have to admit that the movie is just really well made. And you can't get around how well made it is, even if the tone or the tempo of it is not to your liking. But I think it's interesting. And also, Gene Siskel, who was with Roger Ebert for a long time, they're the guys who did the 2 thumbs up, 2 thumbs down, did not like Aliens either, because he had this interesting rule that any movie that put a child in danger was immediately on his hit list.
Okay.
Because he felt like it was a cheap move to put a child in danger, because then you're immediately, the audience already feels for a child. You put the child in danger. He felt that was a cheap shortcut. I think it's funny that he had that as a rule, because I don't think there should be rules about you can never do this in a movie, because I think they do a pretty good job of why they put her in danger. But I thought that was interesting. That was his flat out rule. So the 2 biggest movie critics of the day didn't particularly like this movie, even though it was up for a bunch of Oscars and whatever else.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, opinions for movies, change over time. The culture has changed a lot. And
even though the movie by the public was very well received at the time. Though.
Yeah. So, like, it's always hard to say this movie's good or this movie's bad, because it always just, comes down to taste. Like, you prefer the first one, I prefer the second one. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong or you're right or anything like that.
Well, and let's talk about this. We were discussing, you've been on a movie binge recently.
Yeah.
And you've been watching a lot of classic films.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of, and I relate to this too, because when I was watching all these movies for the first time, a lot of, what am I missing? It's a great way you put it. There's like, okay, I'm not into this. Why is everybody else into this? But that's something that Aliens does not have. I really feel like most people, that just like modern movies, if you were to sit them down and say, hey, we're going to watch a movie, and they've only seen Marvel movies, or they've only seen modern movies, I think they would still like Aliens.
Yeah.
I think it's a movie that has aged very, very well. And you don't have to be a film buff to like this movie. Am I wrong? Am I crazy?
No, I think you're right. I was actually going to say earlier, I felt the reason people like Aliens more is just because it appeals more to a mainstream audience. Because you got the sci-fi, you got the action, and
good characters.
Yeah, good characters. So that appeals to a lot more people than just like taking it slow, taking it quiet, and having good sci-fi, but not too much sci-fi.
That's true. It doesn't get super crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't add any new elements besides the Queen, which is an interesting.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the actual mythos of the alien universe, the first one has we introduced the what's his name, pilot in the thing, the space jockey.
Yeah, the space
jockey, and we introduced the eggs, and we introduced the life cycle of one alien.
Yeah.
In the second film, the really important additions that James Cameron has are the alien queen. That's the biggest one. Because now we know where the eggs come from.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's multiples of these things that can't exist. Although he doesn't go into where they came from. And I think that's smart, because I think you can add like one thing at a time.
Yeah.
if he'd added a bunch of other myth. I think that's a problem that Prometheus and Alien Covenant have, especially Prometheus, is we're trying to add tons of history and mythos to this.
Yeah, and you really shouldn't squeeze it all into one movie. I think what makes, like, say, a movie interesting, like, say, the Star Wars movies, is that they give you mythos, like, a piece at a time, you know? Of course, then they tried cramming in something dumb like metachlorians, but it was still small pieces, bite sizes.
Yeah, I agree. And your focus should be on character and telling a good story. And James Cameron definitely achieves that.
Yeah. I really do feel like by the end of Aliens, Ripley is a different character than when she started, and that's what's important to me. Like, is the character different at the end of the movie when compared to them at the beginning of the movie? And she is. She really is.
Well, I find how do I put this? There are two kinds of good characters, and I know I'm stealing somebody's quote, and I apologize, I just don't remember who. But there's two kinds of good characters. There are characters that are interesting because they change. And there are characters that are interesting because they don't change. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a lot of times lazy writing means a character doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And we can get rid of that. But I don't think it's the case every time. I think there's sometimes a character that will go through... Captain America is a good example.
Yeah.
Like, he goes through so much stuff, and he's relatable and interesting. He does change. Don't get me wrong. But the core of him does not change very much. And that's why he's interesting. But I'll agree with you in this, that in this movie, everyone is changed, except for... except for Bishop. Bishop doesn't change. I think Bishop's the same programmed at the beginning as he is at the end. It's just, it's revealed to you in pieces.
Yeah.
So that's why he seems like he's interesting and changing, because you're peeling back layers.
Right.
But it wouldn't make any sense for a robot to change unless they've set that up that he can.
Yeah. And that's not really his character arc. I feel like his arc was just being revealed to us that, okay, he's actually a good android. Mm-hmm. He's not going to experiment on his crew members with the aliens and stuff, and anything crazy like that. And I feel like throughout the whole movie he's just kind of trying to, I don't feel like he's intentionally doing it, but he's trying to prove to everyone in the audience that he's loyal, that he's good.
Yes.
Because when they say, like, okay, somebody's got to go out there and they got to move the satellite dish manually, he's the one who does it. Like logically, I should be the one to do it. He basically volunteers himself to do it. He doesn't say that he wants to, but he says, like, I should do it.
Because he works by logic in his programming.
Yeah.
And yet we can invest a lot of emotion in him as the character, or as the movie goes along.
Yeah, and it's really satisfying near the end, right before he gets skewered. But when Ripley says, like, Bishop, you did a good job.
Yeah.
It's like, and you just kind of see this little twinkle in his eye. Like, that's all he wanted. Just for people to trust him.
Yeah. I really like that. Again, that's a nice little touch that James Cameron brings to it. He doesn't feel like he has to be a slave to the first movie. A lot of movies nowadays, and even back then, if they're doing a sequel, they're like, what do people like about the first one? Okay, it all has to be that. It has to be basically the same movie, beat for beat. Just we changed little things. And that's not at all what happens here. It's a totally different experience. But I think that's the best way to do it. And he uses a lot of stuff from the first film when he needs to, and then when he doesn't, he tells his own story. And I think that this and Empire Strikes Back really laid the groundwork for what sequels could be. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be a remake of the first movie. They're a continuation of the story. Yeah,
because I feel like the second movie, Aliens, it opens up a lot more possibilities. They definitely take a couple of beats from the first one, but they find a way to make it their own. Like, for instance, I said the opening sequence. Not the opening sequence, but the part where you see the ship before the Marines wake up. It's kind of similar to what it was in the first one.
Yeah.
But that's not the opening scene, and they know how to take it in their own direction and new directions. And the whole point of a sequel is to take the series in a new direction, not just copy the first one. To kind of improve, maybe not always improve, but maybe just try to do something different.
Well, it's smart that he takes it in such a different way, because then you stop comparing it.
Yeah.
If you have a movie that's a really good first movie, the last thing you want is people going, well, and comparing it and contrasting it. And he makes it so different that even in style, like stylistically, Ridley Scott's all about these painterly compositions in widescreen. James Cameron's all about where do we need to put the camera to tell the story. Mm-hmm. There's not a single frame of Aliens that's like, oh, look at that, it's so beautiful. Yeah. It's just very utilitarian. And it's a good choice, because Ridley Scott has one of the best eyes in movie making. He's such good at putting a frame together. Why even compete? Don't even try.
Yeah.
Just do something else. It's very smart. Any last thoughts on Aliens?
I did want to mention one of my favorite parts. One scene I did really like was the part where like Ripley is, she gets in the elevator and she's going down to save Newt. I kind of liken that to it's almost like she's descending into hell.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it's like it's smoky. It's like she doesn't want to go there.
There's fire and stuff.
Yeah,
too,
there's fire
there?
and stuff. There's old broken machinery. And stuff. Oh yeah, one fun fact. That's actually the reason it looks like it's an actual facility because it was an actual facility. It was like it was an old power plant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were trying to get like an old oil refinery or something, but none of them really had the look they wanted. Mm. But they went in there and there was a ton of asbestos, so they had to have it cleaned out. And for a couple weeks. But yeah, they went in there and then it looks like an actual facility.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so surprised that they were able to blow off so many explosions and things like that in there. Wow.
But yeah, so anyways, that was my favorite scene, but just because it's very symbolic. Mm-hmm. So yeah, honestly, I would be here all day if we talked about every single thing I liked. But it was a good follow up, a good sequel, and like you said before, it's really set the groundwork for what sequels could be.
Well, and then these were the two movies we really wanted to hit in our Alien series. We will see if we're going to go forward with them because they could be interesting discussions, but it's kind of depressing to consider what happened to it after this.
Yeah.
So much potential.
Yeah, so much potential lost.
And then,
I know. Well, here's the thing. If I talked about Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, here's the weird thing. I'm more angry at Alien 3 than Resurrection. Because I feel like Resurrection wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Alien 3. But, yeah, I just feel like it'd be kind of a rant. A really long rant if I talked about Alien 3.
I do like some of the ideas that were jettisoned. But even then, I'm not sure they would have made good movies. They're just interesting ideas. And the movie itself is such a mishmash of things. That's the perfect example. The first two movies were made by very strong visionaries who wanted it their way, and they got it their way.
Yeah.
The rest of the movies, not at all. They're made by studio, and David Fincher was directing the third film, and he went on to do things like Seven and The Social Network, and all these amazing movies. A fantastic filmmaker, but he never made a movie before. And the studio rode over him until he quit, and they edited the movie. Yeah. So
yeah, and the fans don't like it. This is why studios shouldn't make movies.
Because you can't make a movie by committee.
Yeah.
Win, lose, or draw. I think you have to have a vision, and now that vision doesn't have to be the director. It could be the producer, or something, but somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to have a vision. And I think you'll see movies that are deeply divisive. Like some people love them, some people hate them, but they're still because it's one person's vision. The movies that everybody hates or everybody feels like nah about were made by committee. Mm-hmm. I think people respect passion.
Yeah, I definitely respect passion. You can see that's what happened with the first and the second film. Granted, maybe some of the crew members had some, they were a little bit rough with Cameron, but I mean, he knew what
they'd never seen any of his movies.
Yeah.
So they had no idea who this young Canadian, whatever. And he kept trying to schedule screenings of Terminator to be like, look what I can do, and no one would show up.
So I think maybe it's their fault that they didn't have any faith in him,
And they didn't stop him, because he still made the movie anyway.
Yeah.
And got on with it.
So yeah, it was a good film. I think, if we had more visionaries doing, Alien sequel films, honestly, they should probably just stop. But if we had some more visionaries, maybe a visionary to just completely remake Alien 3.
Well, and here's the thing. We get caught on this, and I understand it because everything's a franchise now. I'd like a visionary to make another Alien. But not Alien, like another original movie that is his idea, that's something new. And I get excited by new stuff. It's hard to find because there's so much noise out there. But I have faith that there will be another Alien one day. There'll be another Star Wars one day. Mm-hmm. New ideas that kind of explode on the scene. And of course, they'll be turned into franchises.
Yeah, but get that money.
I've really enjoyed going back to look at these two movies, and I want to thank Mac because you're the one that got us doing this. I've always loved at least these first two movies, and I've never had a chance to talk about them in this detail. So thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, I had a lot of fun too, especially learning more about these classic movies that until this year I hadn't seen before. I hadn't seen them before this year. I got the collection because a friend was giving it out for like $15, and I thought, Well, 4 classic movies. Well, maybe not the 4th one, but 4 classic Alien movies that we're going for $15. It sounded like a pretty good deal, and I just watched it by happenstance, and I knew about you and how you liked talking about films, so thought it would be a good opportunity.
Well, again, thanks again for letting us do this, and you have any thoughts on Alien? Let us know on our Facebook, and maybe we're full of crap. Maybe Alien 3 is amazing, and there are those people.
It's totally not. I'm just going to say, in fact, it's not. No, I'm just kidding. If you like it, don't let me take that away from you.
Yes, love what you want to love. Anyway, this has been Cinematic Syndrome. Thanks so much for listening to us in this 1 or 2 part series that we've been doing here, and we will talk to you next time.